Welcome to this special edition of the Fast Lane. Trey Lyle here with you. I'm joined with Pete Sampson of The Athletic. He covers Notre Dame football and is a all-around great guy when it comes to college football. And we're covering the big game of this weekend, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, Saturday night, the ACC Network special in Blacksburg, Virginia. Pete, let's jump right into this. And to me, looking at this matchup, these teams are very similar. The strength of their team, probably their defense, even though it's had some bad moments, but really bad offensive struggles for both teams. And they're both 3-1 teams that don't feel like 3-1 teams.
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame, you mentioned the defensive struggles out of the gate, Florida State, to a lesser extent, Toledo, but, some big plays allowed. And then really for the last three games, even in the loss at Cincinnati, I thought they're playing well on that side of the ball now. So it's like have they muddled their way to get to 4-1? Yeah, for sure. I think that the fourth quarter against Wisconsin, when you have a kickoff return touchdown and then two pick sixes to end the game, you end up winning a game 41-13. That was much more of a 24-13 or 21-13 style of game. So it's they're very similar. I mean, talking to my colleague at the Athletic, Andy Bitter, who covers the Hokies, it's like quarterback has been a little underwhelming, defense good in spots. Offensively, people sort of expected a little bit more. There are definitely a lot of similarities between the two programs right now.
And looking at Notre Dame offensively, it's really like the shock is their offensive line has been the weakest part of their team, which is historically, the strength. This is an NFL offensive factory when it comes to offensive linemen. You think of great offensive linemen in the NFL, a lot of them come from Notre Dame. I mean, the best guard in the NFL is Quentin Nelson, who's from Notre Dame, obviously. What has happened to this offensive line this season, and just what is like this was a strength of Notre Dame last season, and they for a team that made a playoff.
Yeah, they turned over a lot. I think you lose four starters. So this was going to be sort of a bit of a rebuilding year on the line. So were they going to take a step back? Yes. But the guys that they're filling in these gaps with are, for the most part, four-star prospects, top 250, top 100 level players, with the exception of Kane Madden, who was a grad transfer from Marshall, who was an All-American there. And they just have not been able to put it together. Injuries have not helped. They've played four different left tackles in 5 games. So that has been an ongoing struggle. I think that's going to continue to be a struggle the rest of the year. And I think overall they're operating at sort of a less than the sum of their parts situation now, where should this be a great line? No, but should it be an average line? Yeah, and they're not even close to average right now. So that's been the biggest shock of this season. It's not that the offensive line took a step back; it's that they have just really gone all the way to the bottom of college football in terms of sacks allowed, average yards per carry, rushing yards per game, third down conversions, yards per play. It's just a full-on retreat at that position, and they just haven't been able to build themselves up offensively because they don't have a solid foundation with those front five on the offensive line.
And another question, shaky offensive line play and then shaky quarterback play. I mean, Jack Cohn came in against Florida State and lit the world on fire, and he looked incredible. And then since then, it appears that Drew Pine has kind of emerged as the guy. Who do you expect to play quarterback come Saturday night, and why is there going to be some consistency from that position?
I expected to be Drew Pine on Saturday night. Would I say that I expect consistency? No. 5 games into the season, there's not really a reason to believe that there would be. I expect Drew Pine to go sort of start to finish against Virginia Tech, but that doesn't mean I expect him to come out and look like Ian Book did against Virginia Tech in his 2 starts. This is a quarterback that still has a ton of necessary growth that has to happen. He's never played on the road. I mean, forget never started on the road. He's not played on the road. So that's a difficult situation. And I'm not sure that you could look at Drew Pine right now and feel like, oh yeah, this is the guy that's going to win the game for Notre Dame. Can he help Notre Dame get to a win? Yeah, absolutely. I think he's got a little bit more of escapability than what Jack Cohn did. And I think he's certainly got more experience than Tyler Buckner, their freshman quarterback, but not by a lot. So it's a very difficult situation right now for Notre Dame at quarterback.
And to go with that, obviously, Virginia Tech's defense's weakness has been the rushing game, and it helps to have Kyron Williams, in the backfield, an All-American caliber running back. The unfortunate part is he's not really lived up to expectations. This was a guy who's supposed to be one of the best running backs in the country, and I think mainly from the offensive line struggles. But could the key for Notre Dame's victory, especially offensively, is finally get this run game going against a defense that has been successful to the run? I mean, Levy Brown from West Virginia had a big game.
I don't see that happening on Saturday. One, I think Kyron Williams actually has had a really good year. You would not know it just by looking at box scores. But as a receiver, as a pass protector, he's been excellent. I am encouraged somewhat by what I saw in Notre Dame against Wisconsin, which is going to be weird to say because they only had 242 yards of offense in the game. But they are willing to go into a game and be like, all right, we can't run the ball. So let's not try to force the run on first down and then get into a bunch of 2nd and 9s just to say we tried to establish the run. So if Virginia Tech can take away the run, if they play a run first style of defense, I think Notre Dame will come out throwing. They're comfortable doing that, at least trying to do that. So Saturday night doesn't strike me as the time where Notre Dame's going to suddenly have their run game clicking. I think Drew Pine might help a little bit in that regard, only because he is mobile and you can actually run sort of some zone read concepts with him. Whereas with Jack Cohn, it just doesn't make any sense to do that because there's nothing to respect off the run. So that may help a little bit, but Notre Dame is averaging about 80 yards rushing per game. If they put up 130 at Virginia Tech, which is a pretty modest number, but if they did that, I think they would be thrilled.
So do you expect maybe more of a screen game trying to get, because Kyron Williams is one of your best offensive players, like maybe more of a screen game? That another thing West Virginia did well.
Yeah, that's something that Notre Dame does well. Kyron Williams plays that well. Their offensive line they've struggled in some other areas. As a sort of a group that can set up screens has done a pretty good job. I think Drew Pine can throw it. Jack Cohn could throw that as well. So screen game, short passing game, throwing to the running backs directly out of the backfield, like sort of skipping the screen entirely, wheel route here or there. They have to get creative offensively. The difference between Pine and Cohn as a passer is Cohn can really push the ball vertically with good arm strength. Pine is much more of an intermediate to short type of passer. So that may lend itself to more direct passes to the running back. That may lend itself to Michael Mayer being featured, their tight end, even more than he already is. But it's getting Kyron Williams involved touches is the most important thing. How many of them are carries is, I think, less significant for Notre Dame right now.
Moving to the other side ball for Notre Dame, obviously they got the hire of the hot young defensive coordinator in Marcus Freeman coming over from Cincinnati, ironically, being their only loss this year. And obviously the other side, another hot young defensive coordinator in Justin Hamilton. Marcus Freeman, a little bit more name value and recognition. But this defense has had moments of good, but obviously you touched on in the beginning, they didn't look good against a really mediocre to below average Florida State team. Toledo was able to hit big plays on them. And so, and Cincinnati, which is an elite team, it appears, has hit big plays on them. So the big play has been really the issue for the defense.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it's much different the first two games. I mean, you referenced it. Getting hit by big plays against State and Toledo is totally different than giving up a big play to Cincinnati. Like Cincinnati is good. So the way that the coaches and players have talked about those big plays early in the season, it's new scheme, new system. You're thinking more. You're not quite comfortable in your own skin anymore after being with Clark Lee for 3 years. I do think that changed against Purdue. I think it showed against Wisconsin. I think they did a good job against Cincinnati. I mean, look at Cincinnati's offense in the first half. I mean, I believe their average drive was around 15 yards. I mean, they were not moving the ball. Definitely hit them for some bigger plays in the second half. But It, I mean, it's a situation to me that, like, for Notre Dame, they go into Blacksburg feeling good about their defense. Like, I think if you're Notre Dame, you're looking at this and be like, all right, can we win this game 17-14? And I think if you're Notre Dame, you would say, like, all right, we feel good about giving up only 14, but can we get to 17? That's probably the more dodgy question. I think Notre Dame goes into this game with a world of confidence defensively, because I don't think that Virginia Tech can hit Notre Dame where it's weak. Like, Notre Dame is sort of a deep shot defense. If you can look off Kyle Hamilton, their elite safety, and then go to the other half of the field for deep balls, that's where I think you can sort of have some success against Notre Dame. I don't get the sense that Virginia Tech is necessarily built to do that. Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati was, and you only need to hit 2 or 3 of them in a low scoring game to make a big difference. So that's, to me, that's the big thing in Saturday night defensively. It's not just like the big plays of, like, you missed a tackle, so you gave up a big run. It's, can you stop sort of a shot play in the passing game against your lesser safety or your number 2 corner? If Notre Dame can do that, then I think Virginia Tech actually will have a pretty hard time moving the ball.
Yeah, I get the sense, obviously, it's not exactly the same, but, like, both defenses' weaknesses are also the weakness of the offense in terms of Virginia Tech kind of not being able to produce big pass plays and inefficient run game for Notre Dame. So to me, it comes down to, and I'd love to get your thoughts, like, who's able to kind of exploit the weakness of the other, and that's really who's going to win this game. It could be 2 to 3 times, because I think if you're Virginia Tech or Notre Dame, you're trying to win very similar to the score of, like, the UNC game for Virginia Tech, like 17-14, 17-10, even like 20-10 or in that range.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. I think that Notre Dame has more raw ability at the offensive skill positions than Virginia Tech does. I don't think that's like a shocking statement when you're looking at Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree, who's a Virginia kid, Michael Mayer at tight end. Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey have been up and down at receiver, but Austin, if you don't press him in the boundary, he will have a lot of success against you. So how does sort of Justin Hamilton look at that? I don't know how much Virginia Tech plays press coverage at the line of scrimmage, but if you take Austin away with press, then you really need to get Braden Lindsey, their number 2 receiver, involved, or figure out how to get Chris Tyree and Kyron Williams, their 2 running backs, on the field together. So that's why I feel like I like Notre Dame in this game, just because they have more at the skill positions of Virginia Tech. I'm not saying that Notre Dame is loaded and is going to blow the doors off anybody, but I do think that they're more talented at receiver, at running back, at tight end. And that's ultimately what gets you a few more big plays in the game. And that, to me, that should be what makes the difference.
Well, you're leading into my my last question for you. Who do you got? This has obviously come down to a pick 'em, which kind of surprised me a little bit. I guess they really just, the UNC game affected a lot of people. Over under 47, so they get the sense that not a lot of points will be scored. Do you just think Notre Dame is able just to kind of, it's weird to say, out athlete Virginia Tech?
Yeah, I think this Notre Dame team is just built differently than past ones, where, like, their strengths are the skill positions, their weakness is the offensive line. Usually it's the other way around. So I like Notre Dame to win this game. I think it's going to be kind of a funky, out of sync paced game. Kind of Notre Dame 26, Virginia Tech 21, like, even kind of an oddball final score to it. So I don't know. It's to be an interesting game to see how I don't know if the winner is going to come out of this feeling like, yes, everything is great, smooth sailing the rest of the way. But I think the loser of this game may be in some trouble the rest of the way, just because it's going to look like there's a lot to get fixed. And especially if that's Notre Dame. Notre Dame has a bye after this game. Then they have USC and North Carolina back to back. That will be a little bit tricky. So I like Notre Dame, but in sort of a performance that leaves both fan bases kind of like a little bit wondering about what they just watched.
Well, Pete, I want to thank you so much for joining me this week. How can our listeners get more content from you? And obviously you touched on Andy Bitter, who writes also for The Athletic. We've had him on the Fast Lane before, but The Athletic, great service. Help me get set up for this interview. How can listeners connect with you both through social media and through The Athletic?
Yeah, so social media, you can follow me if you're looking for Notre Dame updates for a week at Pete Sampson _ if you're a Virginia Tech fan. But you absolutely should be following Andy Bitter and subscribing to Athletic. Andy does an awesome job for us on the Virginia Tech beat. Very creative, got some great story ideas. So you can come check us out at theathletic.com. I believe that if you're a new subscriber, we're running a promotion at 50% off for your first year, which I think is about $36. So I've yet to find too many dissatisfied customers with the publication. So if your listeners are looking for a new fix for Virginia Tech or even some college football coverage, we've got a great staff over there. So come check us out.
And if it sounded like I knew what I was talking about, it's only because of Pete and Andy's content on The Athletic. So make sure you check that out. Pete, thank you so much for joining me on this special edition of the Fast Lane, previewing Virginia Tech for Notre Dame. If you want to connect with me, at Trey Lyle VT, as always, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also, Fast Lane, @ Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Thank you so much for listening to this special edition of the Fast Lane.